Michael, I wanted to turn our attention to the Online News Act, Bill C-18. Tell us what's going on there.
Yeah, so this is the second part of Heritage Minister Pablo Rodriguez's internet regulation plan. We talked obviously about C-11 on the broadcast side. This involves the news side, and his goal here is to force large internet platforms, most notably Facebook and Google, but potentially other players as well. It could include Apple, LinkedIn, Twitter might all be captured by this as well, to force them to pay for news, and they force them effectively to compensate some of the large, and they would say so, large media organizations alongside some of the other media organizations that are out there right now. It actually does include Bell, it includes CBC as well within the ambit of this. The concerns that we've seen around this is not that there isn't a legit concern with the state of journalism in Canada right now, and the concerns that we've seen, certainly some newspapers close up shop over the last number of years. It's that the government has taken a remarkably interventionist approach in terms of just how its role in terms of sort of dictating some of these terms, and its view that the kinds of things that ought to be compensated aren't just copying news, but linking to news, including news stories within an index, even headlines themselves are all viewed as what the government says facilitating access to news. And that alone is something that they see as compensable.
So, just to give you an example, today it was published an opinion piece that I wrote for the Financial Post. It was published today online, and I immediately shared it via my LinkedIn. So that's an opinion piece that I wrote, but it was published by the Financial Post. Would these be one of the things that the National Post or Post Media would then be liable for because it was published on LinkedIn?
Well, it's not the National Post that would be liable for it. It would be Google
Oh,
or
I
in this
see.
case,
Okay.
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn.
In this case,
Yeah.
it would be LinkedIn that would be liable for it. So
Right.
yes, the idea would be that if that article appeared in the National Post, that's compensable, and LinkedIn was driving links back to the National Post. It gets confusing, but the government's view is that it's LinkedIn that ought to pay for the privilege of sending that traffic back to the National Post,
Yeah.
and that's certainly, and that's the view of the National Post as well. Anyone who's in marketing or knows anything about how internet referral traffic works looks at this and says this doesn't make any sense. Typically, you pay for people to refer traffic to you. In this case, the government is saying no, it's people who are doing the referring that ought to be doing the paying.
So, how does this affect Canadians as consumers?
Well, I think the way it's going to affect our Canadian media ecosystem in some pretty significant ways if it goes through. We've had some of the small and independent media companies saying they're very concerned with this legislation. Many of them are effectively being forced to participate, even though they say that this isn't something that they wanted or lobbied for. And the reason, of course, is if you operate, let's say, a digital online newspaper in an small Ontario community, your primary competitor might well be the CBC, which of course already has tax dollars. But beyond that, the CBC may be getting some of that Google money or Facebook money as well. And so it becomes pretty tough to compete in that kind of environment. So they're concerned about the intervention into this space. I also think that more broadly, when we think about access to information, when we think about the role that internet search plays, about the need for that free flow of information through links and the like, the idea that somehow the government says, no, when you provide those links, that's something that itself ought to be compensated for. You know, there are those that will say, what makes the media so special? If
Mhm.
the media gets paid to have their content included in a search index, or the headlines included in something, or simply having some number of links, why shouldn't my content be entitled to the same sort of thing? I think that's why we've seen a really strong reaction from some of the large platforms who have made clear they're willing to pay for content where there's value add. In fact, many of these publications already have licenses with Google and Facebook where there's value add provided. But their concern is once the government starts stepping in and saying, we're going to define what gets compensated as even inclusion in a search index or basic linking, that's where I think they start becoming concerned, because that really does put some of the kinds of things that I think we take for granted with the internet at risk.
Yeah, we've got about 25 seconds before the break, but uh, the reality of news consumption is not really reflected in this. This is not really let me ask the question. We're going to take the break maybe because I don't want to rush you. But to me, the reality of news consumption today is it's online, and a lot of people are sharing information. So the issue is, does this reflect the reality of online consumption, or is it in some way changing it? We'll get to the answer to that question after the break. We'll be right back.